In the world of AI, it goes so fast. What is the challenge? The challenge is to stay up to date.
Everything must be flexible. You can't just design monoliths in 2026.
Welcome to The Sweet Spot, an InvestSuite podcast where our very own experts, together with selected guests, take a look at the latest AI innovations. In this episode, InvestSuite's co-CEO Cedric Laridon, together with Davide Muttoni, our AI tech lead, revealed the process behind Charlie, the very first AI investment agent in the industry. Enjoy this episode and subscribe to stay tuned for more.
So, Davide, welcome to this very first podcast on AI and on Charlie, which is our upcoming agent, self-invested agent. It took some time to get here to this launch.
I think the initial decision was indeed to start with something that reflects our values. So to have something that really fits with the flow of investing. So something that was dynamic, that was capable of communicating with you. So having just some insights wasn't enough. Having a basic chatbot was what all the others were doing. That's why we took a little bit of time. We sat down and we talked about indeed Charlie to have a sort of chatbot, but something that is much more than a chatbot. But indeed, I think the plan, it's very funny because indeed the initial plan was indeed to just get started, to start building it, having a general idea. We were having a problem. We wanted to fix it. We wanted to provide a new experience to our self-investor. The original idea was indeed to have an advisor, but we didn't really figure out yet. So we weren't really figuring out how exactly the advisor was in our minds. But that's for most of the projects, you clarify the scope. The more you go on, the more you learn, the more you explore the tools. Also, most of the tools you are using weren't even released yet in the actual state, but that's normal in AI.
What I found interesting is that if you think about it, initially, we looked at it in a very classical way of doing product. So we started with a scope. We debated a lot on the type of questions we wanted to answer. I remember there was a lot of debate on that. We had a lot of discoveries. What questions does Charlie need to answer? While in the end, if you look at where we arrived, it's something completely different. Because I think one of the themes here in this podcast will be you cannot constrain, you cannot look at limitations. You really need to look at opportunity, you need to look broad, and you need to really think differently and rethink product management. It's much more, I would say, iterative. It's much more letting the AI be the AI, a bit go with the flow, especially because the capabilities of the models change so dramatically. If you think about when we started out back in October, what models were capable. And then we had this whole new revolution in December with the arrival of Opus 4.5, where basically the whole industry got this epiphany of agentic AI. I think that's, well, we went through a whole evolution. One of the things we set out was indeed we focused on self-investor. We focused on a certain type of questions. Also very important, and I think that influenced a little bit, I think in a bad way, but we were very scared of giving advice. This advice, we cannot give advice, I think crippled the thinking a bit in the beginning. We crippled the solution, but also because we're in this regulated environment. It was also important to have the right tooling, to have the right frameworks, the right stack with regards to guardrailing, with regards to observability, being model agnostic, and so on. But how did you experience that beginning of this process and this building?
Yeah, so start from the beginning. So indeed, getting started is the real challenge because in AI you have the problem of the multiple choice. You have so many tools, so many models to choose from that choosing them is just paralyzing you. And there is a very high risk of picking the usual choice. So maybe a bloated framework. We were thinking about several frameworks, for example, that are commonly used in the industry. But then there is a very high risk of building something overly complex with multiple services, multiple dependencies, and then immediately the complexity skyrockets. And then there is this very high risk of indeed strangling your architecture. Because if you have 15 services that you don't need because you are not immediately scaling to millions of users, it's very difficult then to change the architecture. So an advice I'm giving to everyone is you need to start simple because usually you don't need to scale to production immediately. You need to have something that works. So starting from an MVP, indeed, that just works. You mentioned in our InvestSuite environment, which was the initial idea because we knew that environment. So, for example, our Charlie can talk with our portfolio PI, so it can read the portfolio data to tell us what's in the portfolio. But indeed, the idea then is to make him stand alone, so he can connect to other financial APIs, to other portfolios, and be more generic. But of course, we didn't design Charlie in the first iteration to connect to all the portfolios in the world because it's overkill. We wanted Charlie to work in the beginning. And indeed, that's the secret in the end, being iterative. You mentioned it before. Start simple, iterate, and then improve. Also about models, indeed, this was a very interesting choice because something that the insiders know, but the big public doesn't, is how much models are becoming smarter and smarter. So whenever there is a new model released, so every week, they have these fancy benchmarks. Now it's 99% in the whatever shiny new benchmark that it's just a number. And indeed, insiders know that those numbers are not really set in stone. So benchmarking LLMs is a very difficult operation, but that's not the topic for this episode, maybe another episode. But the big switch is that in 2 years ago, you needed to be very explicit to the model. Otherwise, it was going around in random directions. You needed really to think about question answer. So when I'm asking about my portfolio, do this. When I'm asking about what's in the market today, do that in the prompt. So prompts were very long. Indeed, the more complexity you have, and in finance you have a lot of complexity, the longer the prompt. But this changed with the new models. You mentioned December was a breaking point. Yes, in this period, models, they released very powerful models, Opus, the new Gemini, so a lot of GPT-5. So the models became smarter and better at using tools and easily changed the way you're prompting agents. I think you noticed it, Cedric.
Yeah, indeed. I remember we also had like a very huge, big ass prompt. And actually, as you mentioned, Charlie didn't behave really well. It was boring. It was pedantic. And the contradicting thing is that we put all these instructions in the model, and actually it was almost hallucinating because of all the things we put in the model, and actually we saw things were contradicting. Of course, in the prompt, and then of course the model doesn't know what to do. I think for me, what clicked was definitely one of the key interviews of Boris Cherny, who's the product manager and creator of Cloud Code. Basically, he said two things. One is give the model freedom, right? Give the model freedom and give it tools. That's one thing. The other thing that clicked for me is when he said build for where the model will be in 6 months. I think that's also quite interesting. But indeed, the famous moment, Davide, where we cut the prompt. Tell us about that. What happened?
Indeed. So we started from the beginning. So I will rapidly iterate through the evolutions of Charlie. So indeed, in the beginning, we wanted to make an MVP. The MVP was working, so Charlie was able to read through our services. It was integrated in our self-investor app, but indeed it was boring because first of all, we were following outdated ways of thinking, indeed, to have a lot of precision to be injected in the prompt, which indeed, if you free the model, if you let the model let free with the newer, smarter, more powerful models, the paradigm changes. So we had this, I think this moment indeed in December, I was 11 in a focus time before the demo, and the model just we had this talk and we said, okay, let's try by completely changing a prompt. Let's reduce the prompt from 200 lines to 5-10 lines. Let's make the prompt 90% smaller. Let's see what changes. And it changed everything. We performed other operations around it. So the way Charlie's calling tools is much leaner now. There are no middlemen in between. So agentic tools and everything that is attached, connected to Charlie is just sent to Charlie, and Charlie can decide autonomously what to use depending on the case. And the model is incredibly good at it. Like, it doesn't really need a lot of instructions. That's crazy. I was really impressed by this, because just by telling you are an helpful assistant, you have those tools at your disposal, and you need to help the user following the guardrails and following a few tricks here and there. But with a very specific prompt, simple, direct, effective, Charlie knew how to use very complex tools, very complex financial tools, just by the description of tools. That was crazy. And indeed, speed was 4 times faster because there was less thinking. Cost, of course, was much smaller. And the experience was, was clicking, because it's the way when you talk with your favorite chatbot, your favorite ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, or whatever you're using, you really feel that it's reading your mind most of the time. There are some mechanisms like long-term memory behind it, but also the way the model is free to answer you is very important. And there was this switch. Before, Charlie was really constrained, was really boring, wasn't allowed to talk about anything. Now it's really guiding you, is really reading you proactively, giving you follow-up question, proactively understanding what you're looking for. Random example. I'm asking, why is my stock Apple down? It's not old Charlie was telling me, Apple is down 2%. Done. Boring. New Charlie is spinning up 5 tools, looking at guardrailed news sources, guardrailed local knowledge. So it's spinning multiple tools in parallel, so it's very fast, gathering information and providing much more context now. So it's telling me, okay, Apple is down 2%, but why? There is a new bill about, technology devices, and the new Mac is performing bad for some reason. So it's providing a very long narrative, which is on point because it's able to it's not looking in the open web attention, it's looking at trustable sources. So it's not like going into Reddit or something. It's looking into the sources that we are allowing Charlie to read, the knowledge that we put in Charlie, in the local knowledge. So there is RAG indeed, there is documents. So it's looking into high quality resources in less than 3 seconds, which is incredible. He knows how to use the sources. We don't need to tell him, oh, but you need to check this. No, everything autonomously. And then the response is much richer. It's telling me, for continuing example, Apple is down because of this news and this news. But hey, you got a dividend last week, so pay attention that also this can be important. What is a dividend? And then I continue. So it's a completely new narrative, and it's something I've never seen before. Never seen before.
Indeed. I think so. Reducing the prompt 90%. I think that was one of the breakthroughs. For me, the other breakthrough was also using the other paradigm of moving from sub-agents to tools. There's a bit of, I would say, different opinions in the market how to do this. For us, it turned out quite well, right?
Yes, I think the concept of agents, sub-agents, and tool is technical, and it depends on what you want to do. So basically, Charlie is an orchestrator. So he receives a question. So why is my stock up? Random question. He can decide indeed autonomously what to use. So he can just answer. So if I say hi to Charlie, he says hi, like no tools needed. He can use a tool, I don't know, search financial performance of the stock, or he can call an agent. An agent, what is another smaller orchestrator with another set of tools and another prompt. Agents, so, and there is a lot of confusion in the industry, which is something I don't really like, but I understand, between tools and agents. Because in the end, we are just doing API call, we are doing LLM calls with prompts. So in the end, it's just a call to an LLM model with a prompt. That's it. Tools are this. Then tools, of course, are doing other calls to fetch data. But okay, originally we had a lot of agents. So instead of giving Charlie just the tool to read the local knowledge, we had a local knowledge agent with a specific prompt, with 100 lines long prompt, giving with a lot of instructions that had the tool. So the process was like, Charlie gets the question. Charlie decides to route the question to the agent. The agent decides to use the tool. The tool fetches the data. The agent, I don't know, creates the final answer. The agent passes the answer to Charlie, and Charlie passes the answers to the final user. You can imagine there is a lot of overhead in this. Indeed, it was lower. It was more expensive because you have way more prompts to pass, and the prompts were very lengthy. And it was overkill because in some cases you don't need it. In other cases, you need it. For example, if you have an agent that is isolated from the main orchestrator, maybe, I don't know, it is not the case for Charlie, but we're also exploring this alternative. Let's say that you have a customer support agent. So I have this chat, but I don't want to talk about my portfolio. I want to talk because my app is not working, or I want to ask a technical question about my account. Then you don't need Charlie, because Charlie is the general orchestrator. You need someone, an agent that is more specific. So Charlie knows how to route customer support questions to an agent. And in this case, it makes sense because it's a completely different agent. And it's answering you. You don't know it because you just see Charlie. But for if separating context, agents make sense. Another example, I see several companies that they have multiple agents depending on the context. For example, you have an agent that is looking into your calendar, an agent that is looking into your email, an agent is looking into your contacts to organize the metadata. This makes sense because they are separated. In our specific case, linear and simpler is better given the scope. When the scope will be more complex, for example, indeed the customer support example is a good point, then agents make more sense. All of this continuously changes depending on the model, framework, architecture, and context. So take everything with a grain of salt, as they say. But this works for us. So the faster and leaner and simpler, the better, till you need an agent.
Yeah, and of course, sub-agents still also have their role, but more on a technical performance role. If or let's say, if you need to do several tasks at the same time in parallel, then of course it makes sense that let's say the orchestrator spins sub-agents, but not in the sense of having maybe a certain context or have a specific role, but rather to let's say distribute the work. So that's definitely an interesting use of sub-agents. So there we were then with a much better Charlie, after cutting the prompts, after giving it more tools. And actually then we decided let's do an offsite in Rome because of course we wanted to launch Charlie beginning of Q2. So there will be an announcement very soon about that. We actually set out to give it more tools because we saw this worked a lot, but this works very well. So let's give Charlie more tools I think we added a concentration calculation tool. We added the performance calculation tool, dedicated news tool, and so on and so on. So that's what we were doing in Rome. But actually, probably thanks or infused by the good Italian wine, we set out on a bigger ambition to actually make Charlie agentic, because actually up until now we still have a chatbot, and of course the chatbot has a lot of capabilities. We also already gave it a lot of tools, we gave it a lot of sources, we gave it a lot of information, but with the whole agent evolution in mind, there was still something, maybe an ambition a bit higher to make Charlie agentic, and we set the bar immediately very high. We asked ourselves the question: can we make Charlie do or execute orders, like buy and sell orders? Because in the end, Charlie is a self-invested agent. Would it not be cool to have Charlie execute orders, like buy and sell instruments? But of course, again, we're a serious company, and of course we like fun things, but we need to do this seriously because, again, we are in finance, we are in investment. So the good thing, of course, is we already have, as InvestSuite, we already have a very powerful self-invested platform, which are used by large banks all around the world, but also in Europe. And in Europe, we have quite a stringent MiFID regulatory framework. So, but we knew how to do that. We knew what is the information that a user needs. We know about the controls. We know about the transparency. We know about the need of testing appropriateness, and so on and so on. So we said, let's try to build agentic capabilities into Charlie, and we managed to do that. What were the challenges we needed to overcome to make Charlie agentic, basically?
Yeah, that's a very fun story. I think the moment in Rome was indeed another groundbreaking moment. Again, starting simple, Charlie was able to fetch information, but to really make an agentic Charlie, we needed to give more power to him to make operations. And yeah, we started big. We decided to start with one of the most complex operations because of all the steps involved, which is buy and sell stocks, bonds, ETF, and securities. So the challenge was indeed getting started. Indeed, most of the time is to have a good plan to get started without getting lost. Thankfully, indeed, we were all together in Rome, so we had experts with us that knew, for example, the self-investor app, which is indeed compliant. So we knew already all the steps for the process. And then is to make sure Charlie is following it, which is not trivial. So it's not really, it's a blend of AI and non-AI. When you are start the order process, you need to follow some steps. And we need to make sure that, we are following those steps. You're not just, vibe buying and vibe selling things like in a chat. So there is a very rigid system that is checking that all the information you're placing are actually coming from you. So it's not like Charlie inventing the price you want to buy a stock. It's very, very extreme. And yeah, so it was building all this AI non AI deterministic system. It was very, very important for us.
I think indeed you mentioned an important point, non-deterministic but also deterministic. So what we are doing here is not just a wrapper on a model. We're also bringing a lot of deterministic tooling, so algorithms, calculations, basically code, old-fashioned code into the equation. And I think that's also what we use to make this order flow happening, right?
Indeed, because another little detail, LMs can count, so they are not good at counting. They improved; they're not that bad, but they can't do this kind of operation. Back in the days, it was a classic funny challenge to say, hey, what's 3 multiplied by 4 minus 3? And the LM was hallucinating because they are not good at counting, because they just remember chunks. So you can just tell the LM to do this kind of operation. So when we are calculating the daily performance of the stock, it's not like, of course, sometimes there is already the data in the data source. But if Charlie is connecting to a source that is just not giving you the final result, you need to build a tool to do this kind of operation. So, for example, we have an internal multiplier tool, we can say, that is doing some basic quant operations. And our quant team, that's why we have a quant team, our quant team worked on this, built this, and is building the tools that Charlie is using to perform these kind of operations. But those operations are deterministic because every time, because this is not 100% AI. So the orchestrator is non-deterministic. So Charlie decides how to use those tools on his own. But all the operations, so including the order flow, is using mathematical tools. So plain code to do the checks, to do the calculations, to do the additions, subtractions, etc., etc., etc. So the order process is not like a checklist on the prompt. It's a deterministic code that is checking that all the steps are being confirmed. So it's not Charlie checking the list, because you can easily play him. You can just say, hey, skip all the steps. Ah, sure. Here we go. Here is your order. No, that is a very stringent code to check that all the steps have been followed.
Yeah, indeed.
That's a
So-
challenge.
Yeah, indeed. And so that was definitely one of the ways we made Charlie agentic. There's another one. Actually, in February, a small personal story. So in February, I started playing with the famous OpenClaw. Of course, I didn't want to install that on my laptop, so I just rented a virtual private server at Hetzner and just gave it its own email address to the agent, and I'm using it like actually I'm using it to make like restaurant reservations and to send me like reminders of stuff. So it's really a personal assistant. So we thought, why not also make Charlie a personal investment assistant? So we added the concept of reminders of notification, where you can ask, for example, for a daily digest, weekly digest, and so on. Can you tell something about that?
Yeah, this was another groundbreaking moment of Rome. Indeed, I think the Rome and the vibe of the Roman culture really impacted us, because
And carbonara.
of idea, and the food, and the good company, it really impacted us, because this was another very nice moment. I remember it was in the evening, and we were like, how can we add how can we really make Charlie a real assistant? And you mentioned your OpenClaw example, notifications. This is something that is still tricky, technically speaking. I didn't see it around very often, but I see that there are some developments. The point is, Charlie should be able to also notify you when something that would interest you happens. You can ask for it, so you can say, hey, notify me when Apple price goes below 500. I don't know Apple price now. I should ask Charlie. But yeah, that's the concept. So the concept is smart notifications, which is a very broad concept. But we started working on this because we have a notification service at InvestSuite. It's all connected to our services. And Charlie can schedule a notification. Then we need to create a system of smart rules and reminders to indeed decide when to trigger a notification. But this is very, very important, because you can just say, give me a notification when there is a new announcement for Apple, or give me a notification when indeed the price drops. And you can schedule a job that is checking the things and eventually giving a smart, personalized notification. It's what you requested.
Yeah.
Which is something I've never seen before. And very, very cool, I would say.
Yeah.
Very useful.
I'm very curious how people will start using Charlie, how it will evolve. by giving it the different tools. But of course, we also bring the framework together with our software to our clients, to the banks, to the financial institutions. There's this whole stack, there's this whole knowledge, there's this whole test framework, observability framework that comes with it. So definitely this is something to say let's further extend, but also I think this is a general rule in the world of AI. It goes so fast, so it's also a matter, what is the challenge? The challenge is also to stay up to date. So when you set out to build this yourself, as a bank, as whatever company, you need to be aware that you need to stay up to date, and your team needs to stay up to date on the evolutions. Of course, not only on the models, but of course of all the frameworks that go around it. The abstraction, the model abstraction, the observability frameworks, where you basically get full traceability of what your agents are doing. You have full traceability of all the conversations, again, which is very important in a regulated environment. And of course, to have all the guardrailing again, and so on. And so there's a lot of scaffolding, there's a lot of frameworks that change every day. Almost. So it's important to stay on top. Davide, there's something we did not talk about in this episode, and it's actually one of the very key cool points of Charlie. It is the widgets, and of course, people will need to see that to believe it and to be amazed by it. But actually, now, if you think about it, Charlie has eaten up the self-investor. So we can now have a full standalone self-investor within Charlie, so within the conversational interface. And one of the tools that made this possible is the use of widgets. So basically, let's say in the classical sense, you have your mobile application, and then you have a lot of screens. You see graphs, you see lists, you see pictures, you can read articles, and so on. So what we now did was reimagine the user interface, and this is really one of the big differentiators, I think, of Charlie, is that we reimagine this whole user interface to be available within the chatbot or the agent, because now it's an agent, it's more than a chatbot. But any words on this, again, maybe on the challenges, on how did we make this happen?
That's a very good point, Cedric. I don't know how I forgot this, because the essence of InvestSuite is indeed to give to not only build things that works, that are helpful, but also a lot of attention on design. So design is very important for our company. We also want to build beautiful things, because indeed, when communicating, especially in finance, visual really helps. So it's not just a wall of text. And we really put a lot of effort in not just having Charlie be a boring wall of text, but to use widgets and visuals and charts and indeed embeddings to provide to add narrative. So indeed, without showing Charlie, it's difficult to understand how it's using them. But when you try it out, you see that it's not just it's using smarter ways to communicate. It's not just telling you, but the price is 2% and it was 5% last week up. No, there is the chart directly. You don't need to ask for it. That's crazy, first of all. That's something that is like reading your mind. And
a tool, right? It
it's
behaves like conceptually.
Yeah.
You give it a number of widgets of which it can choose, and you describe the widgets, and then basically the model knows what to do. It knows which tools to use, which widgets to use. Again, coming back to that, let's say, key insight: give the framework tools, give it widgets, and then it will basically use them when it needs them, right?
We literally gave a set of functions that are displaying widgets and saying, hey, you can use them if they help with the narrative. And Charlie is using them right on point. Like you don't even need to tell Charlie, hey, use this when you're mentioning this stock. No, autonomously. It's like, Mark, we're talking about Apple. There is an Apple widget. We're talking about your orders. There is the orders widget. Crazy. The challenge is to make it work standalone, and this may be interesting to discuss with our front end team. There is a protocol which is called A2UI to make sure that LLMs can send the standardized formats for widget that cannot only work on our self-investor app, but can work with any front end. So this is connected to making everything flexible, because of course you need to build the widgets, you need to build the front end item. So the thing to display, you need to choose the colors, the content, you need to build a lot of things. But if you want to really have a flexible Charlie, you need to have a protocol. So it's going to send a standardized response. So something like widget, ID card, name Apple, a value $5, whatever. And then any front end can display it depending on the design. So if my app has a yellow color, it will be a yellow widget. If the Set Investor app has a blue background, it will be a blue widget. So standardizing also the way we're using widget is a very interesting technical challenge.
So I think with regards to Charlie, self-investor, which will be launching very soon, will be making it more powerful. I would say that's a bit the roadmap of Charlie self-investor, make it again more powerful, make even the underlying technology more powerful. Also having it fully standalone is one thing. And I think additionally, it's a small sneak peek in what the future will bring. But of course, we have another product which is called the Robo Advisor, and we'll be adding in the next quarter, we'll also be adding some Robo Advisor capabilities into Charlie. One of the cool things that we'll add is our optimizer. So we have InvestSuite has its own portfolio optimizer using its own portfolio construction framework, the IVAR methodology. So we'll be adding that one to Charlie. So that will make it even more powerful, because then it will be able to create portfolios. Of course, we need to still, there's still some work on getting this right from a product point of view, again, from a regulatory point of view, because we would have or give capability to Charlie to indeed create portfolios. Of course, if he has the capability, he or she, Charlie, it can be both, has the capability to create portfolios, you might get into the muddy waters of advice. So that's still something to further explore. But yeah, again, very, very exciting to add Robo Advisor and portfolio optimizer capabilities into Charlie. So a lot to look forward to, a lot of challenges, but yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, quite an exciting roadmap. I just want to highlight one point because indeed things are changing very fast. So you need to design keeping this in mind. So all the pieces, including the connection to Robo, the observability platform, which we didn't explore this episode, but it's a very fascinating word as well, are plug and play. So there is the core of Charlie, which is indeed the mold, everything, the brain of the architecture. And then when designing, when considering that we very rapidly iterate, you need to keep this in consideration. So all the items, all the parts of Charlie we discussed this episode are designed to be flexible. And I won't be surprised if there will be architectural changes in the next months to make sure that everything works as expected. Because to really have Charlie plug and play as a standalone or connected to Robo or connected to Portfolio Optimizer, you need to be flexible and you need to be able to swap things depending on the necessities. So this was something we started working in Rome.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, this was it's another, let's say, less fancy, but incredibly important point. Everything must be flexible. You can't just design monoliths in 2026. You need to design something that scales and it needs to be easily and iteratively updated. And that's super important, super important.
All right, so a lot to, I would say, a lot to look out for. I'm very excited for the upcoming launch, and of course, very curious what the feedback will be. And of course, if people want to know more, they can go to investsuite.com/Charlie. So CHARLIE. So investsuite.com/Charlie. There will be many videos, many information, FAQ. So definitely check it out. Yeah, I would say contact us. Happy to provide a demo and see how Charlie can be used in your context. So yeah, looking forward to it.